Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called בשלום. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse on a Tuesday, which was the 17th day of the month of Chislev, in the year tafshin mem aleph, 44 years ago, before Mincha. And later the Rebbe went on to certify and edit this Chassidic discourse in honor of the completion and the bringing in a new Sefer Torah that was done in honor of the Rebbe. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse in the Psalms where it says, בשלום נפשי, God redeemed my soul in peace, mikravli, from those that were close to me, kibarabim hayu imadi, because many people were with me. So Rebbe said it's known the points that are brought out from the Alter Rebbe, who the Rebbe was celebrating his redemption on the 19th of Kislev, and his son, who took over his leadership, the Mittler Rebbe, who celebrated his redemption on the 10th day of the Kislev, that in this verse he brings out that the redemption and the Geula in general, not only that there was a general redemption, but the redemption was done specifically in the idea of peace. And also it says, mikravli, from those that were close to me, not in the way of a war combat. And also we have to point out what it says, mikravli, that the redemption was specifically for me. Also what it says, kibarabim hayuadi, because multiple people with me. In other words, that's the reason why he was redeemed. So what's the idea of because of multiple people with me? Rebbe says the point of the explanation is as follows. When do you need to be redeemed? Obviously if you have opposition. Because if there's no opposition, what are you being redeemed from? So in other words, since holiness is the only way and the only thing that really exists, but when you have an opposition, you have the existence of darkness and silliness. So you need to have the redemption from darkness and silliness. Now this redemption brings that the holiness will be on the contrary. Like the concept is, light is light, but when you have darkness, the light that comes afterwards is obviously much greater. And like the greater part of your wise person, when you have silliness and you're dealing with the struggle, so the wise shines out much stronger. In other words, when you redeem from darkness and silliness, so then you have the greater light and the greater wisdom, not only quantitatively, but more importantly, qualitatively as well. Now, this redemption could be done in two ways. One in a way of a war, and one in a way of peace. So what is the verse coming to bring out here? That how is the redemption done? It's done specifically in a way of peace. And in that itself, both the war and both the peace, it's possible in two ways. One could be that the redemption is the one where you're standing close combat with the thing that you're trying to transform, and even though it wasn't transformed yet, but you go in close combat, or it can be you're standing far away. And over here, the verse brings out that the redemption is done in a way that's close combat, in a way of closeness. And like it's explained at length in the Chassidic discourse of בשלום of the Mittler Rebbe. And what does li mean? That the redemption is done in a strong way. Because once the redemption happens, it's locked in and it's not going to change. Because anytime it says li means it's not going to change, it's lasting forever. Now the reason why that this all happened, kibarabim hayu imadi. Now, what does it mean, Rabin? So he says there's two insights. One is referring to the prayer of multiple people, and the second idea is on the redemption, because the fact is the redemption was of everybody. Like the Rebbe said, I wasn't redeemed; everybody was redeemed. So the power of the Rabbim, either of the prayer or of the redemption, that caused it to happen. Now, all these ideas also applies to we serve Hashem, like it's brought down in the Chassidic discourses. And therefore it's also understood it applies to Torah as well. Like the verse says, Zois ha-Torah Adam. So there's a connection between our service to Hashem and the way it's in Torah. And based on we know what Chazal tell us, that Hashem looked into the Torah to create the world. So this obviously, the way it's in Torah, and that's from there it goes into the world. So what does that mean? Never explains as follows. When it says בשלום, the way it's in the Torah, so we know that Torah is not in heaven, and it was given specifically for people living in this world. Now, since the Torah exists in this world, in a world of darkness, in a world of silliness, so you have to redeem the Torah from the darkness and the silliness. And by redeeming it, you have the greater light that comes from the darkness. Now, based on what it's known, in the higher worlds, what's real? Real is godliness. Materialism, physicality, that doesn't exist. In this world, sadly, just the opposite. What's real? Physicality. God? Revolutionary idea. But to reveal God in this world, that has to become revolutionized. And that is the redemption, that we're taking what we see as reality, the physical world, and God is a revolutionary idea. We're making God real. That's called redeeming God from exile. And the same thing also applies to Torah. Now, in this, there's many levels. And generally, there's two levels. In other words, just like when we serve Hashem, the redemption comes through a way of combat and through a way of peace. And that's the difference between serving Hashem through prayer and serving Hashem through Torah study. So the same thing also applies to Torah as well, that there's two levels. In other words, there's a type of learning Torah where it says, educate the child based on his level. And like the Rambam explains at length in his explanation of Mishnayot, that you have to find many, many different ways and ideas so that the study and the education should be befitting for the child based on his situation, where he is. And there's a way even of learning Torah. So that's one way, bringing it down to the level. But then there's a way of learning Torah the way it's in heaven. In other words, even though you're learning Torah down here, but the way you learn it, it doesn't, get caught up with the world. And it's not even connected on any level to this world. Now, just like you have these two differences in learning Torah, the same thing also you have in the Torah itself. And like it's brought down in Raya Mehemna, and it's explained by the Alter Ben Igeres HaKodesh. And we know the Alter is the one that was celebrating his redemption when the Rebbe said the Chassidic discourse, that in the revealed Torah, which is called the Eitz Hadas Toivara, the tree of knowledge, good and bad. So you have a question, and you have arguments, and you have to have the war of Torah to respond and to dissect what's going on. That is one type of Torah, where it's a struggle. Then you have the internal part of the Torah, which is called the tree of life. And over there, there's no questions. Up till you have the well springs of the Baal Shem Tov, which is revealed, which is called the Torah of Chassidut, and that is basically the redemption, which is in the level of peace. Now, the redemption can happen in one of two ways: either in standoff from distance, or in a way close combat. So what is the revolutionary idea over here? That the redemption is done in a way of mikravli, in close combat. What does that mean practically? The Rebbe says, well, understand that based on an explanation of the Alter Rebbe, what he explains based on what it says in Chazal, that when a person prays, you have to put your eyes down and your heart in heaven. So your eyes are down in this world, but your eyes are in heaven. What does that mean? That you have to see the physical world. You need your feet on the ground. Even though your heart is on the most highest level, your feet needs to be on the ground. You have to be, so you need, on one hand, you need to be your feet on the ground, but you have to be tied in heaven. So even when you're tied in heaven, you have to see the physical world. You have to see the world. You have to see reality. So that's when prayer. The same thing applies with learning Torah. That a person has to learn Torah. You learn the greatest ideas, but it has to be practical. And like we know it says, what is the greatness of study? Because it brings you to do action. Up to the point when you're learning, you have to be able to bring halakha. What is the Jewish law? What are we learning from it? What is the end result in practicality in this world? And then, when you learn on that level, then you come to the true level of learning and the intent of learning, because you're bringing it down into a practical level. And he continues on in the verse to say, "Ki barabim hayu imadi," because many people are with me. What does that mean? So one insight is, how did it happen? How was a success? Because of the multiple people that prayed. Because what happens is, even when somebody's the highest level, he prays and he studies and does mitzvot, but on the highest level, there is still a quality of prayer and off the charts greater when you pray with the community, which in Hebrew is called tefillas harabim, the prayer of the community. And like we understand from what we see when it comes to the prayers of the 10 days of Tshuva, so it says very, very clearly. Over there, it's basically individual prayer and community prayer. What does that mean? That an individual prayer in the 10 days of Tshuva is like community prayer a whole year. And how much more so when you have a community prayer in the 10 days of Tshuva. So the highest level is prayer, 10 days of Tshuva. Then you have an individual prayer at the end of the tshuva, but throughout the year there's something about communal prayer. That's one idea, the prayer of the community. And the second insight, that you're including everyone in your prayers. What does that mean? Because like the Baal Gula explains in his prayer book, which he brings from the Rizal, that it's befitting before you start praying, what do you say? Hareini mekabel alai mitzvahs asay shel v'ahavta l'recha. I'm accepting about myself the mitzvah to love like my fellow, like yourself. And when do you say that? Before you even start Matoivu Alecha, right in the beginning. And this penetrates through all the levels of prayer. Matoivu, Haidu, Shmona Esrei, Aleinu L'Shabeach, till the end. Which Joshua said when he conquered the land on the first time, that we have as an everlasting inheritance. In other words, all the levels of prayer is complete when a person accepts upon himself the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. So this is prayer. So what does it mean filled, Barab? One is where you're praying with multiple people, and the second part is when you're including everyone in your prayer. And Rabbi finishes off and he says like this: read the will of Hashem, that everyone should do what in our power to fulfill the request and the power that the Baal Gula wanted to spread Chassidus all over the world. And as we know, that the main idea of spreading Chassidus started after St. Petersburg, after he was released from prison. In other words, not only afterwards and the cause of it, but literally that is what happened in prison, because the fact is, when we know that we have an olive, when you squeeze it, that brings out the oil. So the squeezing of the prison brought out the spreading of Chassidus. And you can say that possibly that's why the Alter was in prison for 53 days. 53 in Hebrew is Nun Gimel, which is the same letters as Gan as garden, so that he's able to afterwards spread the Chassidus into the garden of Hashem, which is in this world. So from here we see the tremendous schus, the tremendous merit of being busy with spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus, to spread it all over the world, men, women, and like the previous Rebbe said, that even women are obligated to learn Chassidut. Because the fact is, the mitzvah of learning Chassidus brings us to love Hashem, being in awe of Hashem, and the women are responsible in that as well. And it's a consistent obligation, like it's brought down in the introduction of Sefer Chinuch, and for children as well. L'man yishmu v'l'man yilmadu, they should hear and they should learn and they should observe this Torah. And never finish off, and he says it should be the will of Hashem that every one of us should be busy with it. And we should do it well, and we should do it strongly. And not only that, especially when the last days of Gullus, there's a few days left of Gullus, and this is going to bring very, very soon, and from a place of joy and gladness of heart, that we're going to go with our family, with our children, with the elders, with our sons and our daughters, to receive Mashiach Tzidkenu, and we're going to go together with Mashiach Tzidkenu, with all the Torahs of outside Israel, and with all the synagogues, and with all the yeshivot of outside Israel. We're going to go all to Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land. And the Rebbe says it's going to happen b'meheri yameinu, very, very soon, mamash, literally, b'simcha, with joy, or with tuv levav, and with gladness of heart. So here we see another powerful Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe about the power that we have by unity, and by unifying ourselves, and by redeeming the Torah, redeeming ourselves, and God willing, we'll redeem ourselves with simcha, and we'll have the coming of Mashiach, and next week's class will be in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.